Serious? Have you ever known someone who wholeheartedly believed that they were wolfkin, a vampire, an elf, had special powers, and couldn't handle the reality that they weren't when confronted? What happened to them? I had a woman call my office once trying to return a weapon to the military. Apparently she was the weapon. That sounds like a pickup line. Way back in the 80s, while I was still in elementary school, there was this kid who, every day, swore he was a ninja. He couldn't show us any of his moves or weapons, as his sensei had forbidden it, but that didn't stop him from making his outlandish claims, like the nunchucks and ninja stars he had hidden in backpack, or how he had fought and killed an entire gang, etc. One day, he claimed he could spin so fast he could turn invisible. Several classmates demanded he prove it during free time, and for whatever reason, he finally relented. He started spinning in circles, but we could still see him, so he kept spinning until he threw up. My friend thought he was Deadpool with all the powers and all. He once fell off his bike and broke his arm, and he thought it would heal straight away, and he refused to go to the hospital as a result. He now has a really crooked arm. She cheated on her boyfriend occasionally, but would claim that it's not cheating because she would only do it during full moons, so it was her werewolf half doing it and not her. I knew a girl like this. Now she's an astrology nut that does a lot of acid at music festivals and cheats on her boyfriend when Venus is in Gatorade or some crap. A girl in my school, let's call her Emma, believed she came from a different planet that had horses as their gods. Emma convinced my friend and many others that a sheep had told her she was from a magical planet and that she had to worship horses because they are her gods. We were around 11/12 when this was going on, and I couldn't believe my friend believed her. Emma told everybody that she could speak to horses and that they would one day take over the world and we would all turn into horse people. She used to write letters, emails and fake phone calls from her home planet. If anybody questioned her or told her that she wasn't actually from there and was a normal human, and not in fact a human-horse hybrid, she would cry hysterically and then hold a really serious grudge against that person. She hated me. Her friendship group all wore matching bracelets and sang songs about horses and drew pictures of them. This went on until we were around 14. I am pretty sure she would make a great cult leader though, as she managed to convince so many people. My ex-boyfriend was certain he was a vampire. He kept going to churches, cemeteries, all those kind of places. I failed at bringing him back to reality. He died of cancer in January this year. Not the ending I was expecting. My best friend in high school and my first 2 years of college genuinely believed that she could not only speak to forestry, but that she was a wingless fairy. She would oftentimes, when we went walking her dogs, lean to trees and translate for me what the rustling of nature spoke of. She also would scribble in her books what she called new alchemy, violently scribbled circles and void shapes she believed held magical and fey magic through her own powers. We had a falling out after a few years, after she moved to the other side of the country to be with her grandmother. We started talking about a few months ago and I found out she had been diagnosed with schizophrenia. She is currently on 2 types of medication and she told me her walks are depressingly quiet now. And that's the saddest I'm gonna be today. Thanks Reddit. Yep, they had really severe childhood abuse trauma to contend with, and coped with it by believing they were psychic. We met in like junior high when they still believed this. Eventually, they realized that they weren't entirely wrong, just a little bit misdirected. They're a deeply empathic person who, thanks to their abuse history, is very good at reading facial expressions, body language, etc. They're actually a really wonderful person, and ended up becoming a social worker and volunteer at a domestic violence shelter, where all of the qualities that made them a good psychic make them great at helping others who are going through a difficult time. Unfortunately, yes, I met a girl at a very young age while going to church. Her family was deeply religious, but in a messed up way, so we dated off and on, and after high school hit it off pretty strong. She honestly believed she was a fairy. She would get faced with the reality of not being a fairy and completely shut down, sometimes even attempting suicide. Found out later she has really bad schizophrenia and had to get away from her after she discovered drugs, and I couldn't help her anymore. That's really sad. This isn't exactly what you're asking for, but it's similar. From 1st to 6th grade, I had this friend ally that genuinely believed she could see dead people and demons and whatnot. She would do the stereotypical vampire things, pretending to bite people, showing off her canines, talking about blood, etc. But that wasn't like her main thing. She had this one demon that she said followed her everywhere and hid in the bathrooms that we just called it. Ally always described it as being whiter than paper with 2 slits for a nose and sharp fangs. I wholeheartedly believed her because why wouldn't I? I was a dumb kid that wanted supernatural things to be real, and she was my best friend that had no reason to lie to me. I literally was too scared to use the restroom at school because she said that it always peeked over the stall. As the years went on, though, I eventually realized that she was making it up. But the conviction with which she said that kind of stuff was scary. I know her parents were going through a rough patch at the time, so I think she was just making it up for attention, which she got. I haven't talked to Ally in a while, but another friend of mine ran into her at a fair recently and said she seemed to be doing well. I'm glad things are better for her. I met a guy who was supposedly pretty close to the level in Scientology where you're supposed to develop powers like telepathy and stuff. Not sure what became of him. You'd think that once people reached this level and didn't have powers they'd quit, but brainwashing. One of my closest friends that I lived with through most of college thought she had special powers. It was weird, to say the least. She'd been bullied all her life and I always reckoned she developed this as a coping mechanism. The thing that really stood out to me though was that she was so good at getting people to play along with it and I have no idea how. I saw this scenario play out a few times during the time we lived together and I was always so confused as to how she kept getting people on board, so to speak. General scenario went like this. She'd meet someone and if she really liked them, then after a while she'd tell me in a very knowing sort of way that she thought they had the gift, aka they also had powers. She told me once she thought I had them and I just kind of smiled and nodded and said, okie dokie then. So then she'd get together for lunch or something with this person and she'd launch into this full-on spiel about how she was all that was standing between the world and destruction and she could tell that they were also special and she needed someone to help her fight these battles. Not literal battles, more like astral projection type battles. And help her guard the gates. Hilarious side note, the gates were colored cyan, magenta, yellow and black. She got mad at me one time when I referred to them as the printer gates. And you'd think that after unloading all that people would run screaming, but they didn't. They'd show up at our apartment to talk to her and they'd be talking about these battles and stuff. All I can figure is she was good at spotting people with overactive imaginations who didn't fit in well. She probably would have made a great cult leader tbh. She now works in IT and we still talk to each other pretty regularly. She wrote a fantasy novel that she's trying to get published, which was actually quite good when she let me read the draft. I'm guessing that became the outlet for her stories when she grew up, so to speak. I kind of want to ask her about what was going on with her, but I kind of don't want to open that can of worms ever again. When she wasn't in full-on WTF mode, she was the most kind and genuinely fun to be around person. I'm sort of afraid the printer gates will rear their ugly head again if I bring it up. Printer gate killed me. She has to see how oddly specific that is. Not exactly the same as Otherkin, but very much in the vein of the question in terms of total reality denial. I know someone who totally, wholeheartedly, believes that they are a Jedi Master. Our families go way back, so I happen to know other kids were merciless to him all through childhood. He's always had problems, though. Kind of one of those people you can feel aren't quite right but not exactly why. He decided he was a Jedi Master one day. Just, like, out of the blue. Credit where credit is due. He went all the way with it. Became a minor nerd celebrity for a while. At first when people challenged the Jedi thing, why don't you have powers then? He'd say Jedi is a mindset, not a power. Or sometimes you don't know the powers I may have, and try to play it off like a joke. But the dude was 100% serious. If you pushed, he would outright melt down with tears and screaming. Apparently his parents financially supported him pretty much entirely, until he, and this part confuses the crap out of me, got married and had a kid while still insisting on the Jedi thing. After that the wife supported him. Eventually he got tired of that and left his family to take off with a teenager he met at a convention. That's when we cut ties with him. You can be a Jedi all you want, but cutting and leaving your kid is some Sith Lord crap. If the kind ends up a Star Wars fan, there might be a really weird I am your father moment. My cousin. She 100% believed she was a werewolf. She was finally diagnosed with schizophrenia and bipolar years ago. She's doing a lot better now. There's a theory that some reports of werewolves and monsters are because people were unable to comprehend the illness they had. They would have a sense of self and an awareness that something was wrong, but being unable to diagnose themselves would concoct a monster as being ill. It would make sense finally why they were changing, so glad she's better. When I was in the US Navy, we had this dude who thought he was a wolf in a human body. He would howl at the moon and just be generally strange. I knew someone that had served with him before me at a different command who said he had to be forced by medical to shower. When asked why he wasn't showing, he told them it would wash away his scent and he wouldn't be able to attract a mate. I don't know what happened to him. I had a friend who believed that she was a vampire and would try to bite at my wrists and neck. Very often it got to the point where she would bring pig's blood to school and openly drink it out of a cup as if it were juice. Scroll forward 2 days, I'm visiting her in a mental hospital. Where does a high school student even get pig's blood? Someone I used to be friends with identified as a lynx. I was weirded out, but she was my friend, so I dealt with it. Soon she started to say I was sitting on her tail and she was fully convinced she turned into a cat at night. Last I heard of her, she was drawing furry pee for $100 a piece. Must be some good friggin' art for $100. Went to school with a girl who acted like a dog. Barked, panted, pawed at people. In class she would reply normally but then bark at the end. This went on for 3 years. Decided to look her up on FB and she has a good job and seems normal. Teenagers are freaking weird. Was it an actual bark sound or was she like Thomas Jefferson was the 3rd president? Oh, and woof. I actually went to high school with a lot of people like this who eventually grew out of it. I remember one girl specifically because, based on her Facebook, she has not grown out of it. She claimed she had multiple personalities, her main two being herself and the other being a 200-year-old British vampire. We live in the US and she would put on a British accent and everything. It seems she has found a partner just like her though, and they're planning a pretty extravagant vampire wedding. Good on them. Won't lie, a vampire wedding sounds dope as frick. Actually, I'd imagine it would certainly be cooler to be a guest there than a traditional wedding. Years before we had goths and new age enlightenment, I used to manage an occult bookstore and I met wannabe vampires, werewolves, fae, and others. Sometimes it was like being in charge of a Dark Shadows convention. I used to date one of the store's patrons, a 6-foot Amazon from Texas who claimed she was a vampire. She wasn't too crazy, but towards the end of the relationship she was getting too bitty. Talk about a dream job. Yes, unfortunately, he claimed to have an invisible tail and had a dream in which a great mother wolf revealed to him that he had the soul of a wolf. So he did what any sane person would do and started buying first to masturbate onto. He showed me eBay links via Facebook and explained that it's one of the only 2 ways that he can get off, as well as started freaking dogs, or so he claimed. Last I heard, he's in Alaska working with sled dogs all the while he's engaged to a woman who he refuses to have physical relations with because human lovemaking is disgusting to him. I need a drink just freaking writing that. Somebody might want to check on those dogs. When I was in uni, one of my housemates had his mate come over and hang with us one night. At the time we were all into tabletop RPG and stuff, so when I started chatting to him and he mentioned he's a half angel, half demon hunter, I initially didn't bat an eye at it. I was like, that's cool, I'm a telekinetic spirit medium myself, and we chatted happily about it for maybe 10 minutes before I began to clock on that he wasn't talking about RPG. I gotta admit, when I did figure it out, I was not diplomatic. Not aggressive or anything, but not diplomatic. I may have laughed at him. The end of that first paragraph had me laughing so hard. One of my middle school teacher's children believed he could talk to bees. He quickly enough learned that he could not actually talk to bees. I forget if he learned if he was allergic to bees. Oh, everyone can talk to bees. The tricky part is getting them to respond. One time I met a guy by playing online games. He always said something that he is God, and so I thought it's a joke. One day we met and he truly believed he is a god. He said there are more gods on earth and we don't know it. I asked some silly question if he can gave me some proof like teleporting or something. He said that wouldn't work because a human brain wouldn't understand that and then my head will explode. He also said he is a few hundred years old. It was a little bit funny because after the coffee he asked if I could drive him to the train station. Why has God no car? The next day I had terrible headache. I told him that and he said that was him. Because I didn't believe he was a god, I blocked him. Did I know him? I am him. Between the ages of 5-10 years old I was wholeheartedly convinced I was a Jedi. I kept telling everyone that and eventually got confronted by my parents. I guess they assumed it was a phase and I'd grow out of it, but 5 years passed and nothing changed. I remember eventually realizing they were right. I refused to accept it at first, but when I eventually did I remember crying myself to sleep for probably around 3 months. Buckle the frick up, everyone. Because I was that kid in middle school, I wholeheartedly believed I was a forest elf. I don't even really remember how it started, but I always loved fantasy novels growing up, especially ones about mythical creatures and nymphs and fairies, all that crap. In middle school, I wore a lot of earthy colors, always had flowers in my hair, joined the archery club, which I was not good at, mind you. I wore elf ears to school, and I mostly walked around barefoot, not a school, obviously. I thought I would communicate with forest animals and navigate myself using only the trees and any water source. Needless to say, I was definitely picked on a lot. I'm 26 now and an IT consultant, married to a damn great guy, and have a baby girl on the way. I never picked up archery again, I promise. Whoa, I'm surprised I can actually answer this one. In high school I became friends with a girl I met through theater. This was during the Undertale craze. She got me into the game and eventually confided in me that she was kin with Son, the skeleton from the game. I decided to go ahead and go with it because I really liked her and I didn't really have many close friends at the time. I asked her what made her believe she was Son, and she explained that since there's an infinite number of universes with infinite different timelines, there's probably a timeline somewhere in which she really is Son. I think she also identified a lot with his whole "I'm funny and outgoing on the outside but I'm actually really depressed" thing. In all honesty, she had a lot of mental health issues and it was a form of escapism for her. She kept it to herself and never talked about it at school, but I would listen to her when she needed it and I would call her Son after school because it made her happy. I felt bad because she really needed someone to understand her, and it felt like one small thing I could do to make her feel better. She's doing much better now. We kind of fell out of contact, but she's got a good job and I think she's moved on from the Kim thing. It's what got her through high school in one piece, so I don't regret indulging her at all. I know it's easy to make fun of teenagers on Tumblr who say they're an angel or a god or a character from a video game, but please don't antagonize them. 99 times out of 100 it comes from a lack of attention, self-esteem or mental health issues, or just a really strong desire to fit in with a community. You are such a kind and empathic person. Bless you, for serious. Understanding how to be that person for her at such a young age is a very lovely thing and I am so impressed and glad you were there for her. 3. Oh yeah, tons. A large number of people think they're vampires in New Orleans. Many of them drink blood. Me. How old are you? Him. 473. He's a very successful vampire tour guide. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.